It is NFL Draft Eve. It's the day before the draft, and me and my co-host Nick Corbs think it's going to be a fitting time for us to unveil our final top 50 big boards. We're going to go over these players in this big board in groups of 10. But before we get into that, make sure you subscribe for more draft content. After the draft, me and Nu are going to be making even more post-draft content, giving team grades, reviewing round one, doing misses, biggest reaches, best value, etc. So make sure you subscribe for more draft content. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. We're getting closer every single day now, but your support would be much appreciated. Now, Nu, before we get into our top 50, we're first going to shout out some players that haven't quite made the cut, and we'll start with you. Who would you like to, some players that you would like to shout out before we get into the top 50 rankings?
Yeah, just quickly want to reiterate, road to 1,000, we're so close. If you want to see me and Dom do the combine, a bit of a spoiler, please subscribe. We're so close, almost there. My honourable mentions, want to start off with, they're people I mentioned in my offensive and defensive gen videos, who I really wanted to include, but I would just be lying if I said they were if they were a top 50 player. So I've got David Walker, the edge out of Central Arkansas.
Yeah, nice.
Such a big fan of him. But the only reason why I can't put him top 50 is just because of his size. You know, he's 6'2", 6'1", had amazing production, such exciting film, but he's not going to be an every down player, so I just couldn't put him in. Next one is Kyle McCord, the quarterback out of Syracuse. I absolutely love this guy. He's my QB4 rather, sorry. And I have a low second round grade, high third round grade. I really think he could be a starter in the NFL, but again, not good enough for the top 50. And my last one is my guy is Arunde Gadsden, the tight end out of Syracuse, who I really believe could be a dynamic third down threat, but has some significant physical limitations, so I can't quite put him in my top 50.
Nice. I like those shout outs, and David Walker's a really good one. He's not made my top 50 either, but would definitely be in with a shout. The ones that I want to shout out, so I've got Jalen Milroe outside my top 50. I've got Shadur Sanders outside my top 50. They're at 52 and 53 respectively. So Sanders at 52, Jalen Milroe at 53.
Accolade.
And I want to say why. Because when I was doing my top 50, I think this draft is a very interesting draft. It does lack that top end talent, but it has, I think, after basically like pick 20, like the drop off really doesn't exist at that point. Like you just pick the guys that you like. And I'm looking at who I have in my top 50, and I struggle to say that either Sanders or Milroe are better than the guys in there currently. I've also not got Cam Scatterboot in my top 50. He's 51. So it is really a case of these guys just missing out. And there's other players like Damian Martinez, who I really like. I've got Jackson Dart at 59. I've got Elijah Arroyo at 61. You know, Jack Sawyer as well. So there are some really good players, and I just want to shout out Will Howard. He's someone that I absolutely love. He's going to be ranked a bit lower for me. He's actually 71 and 72 at the moment with Tyler Shirk as well. And I really like Will Howard. I think he's my Kyle McCord in this draft, if you will. And he's the quarterback that I'm going to plant my flag on and say that he's going to be someone that could make a few people look stupid on draft day by having him too low. Because I think Will Howard is a good quarterback. But without further ado, Nu, let's get into our top 50. So we're going to go 50 to 41. And you take it away first.
So number 50, I've got Landon Jackson. Number 49, Benjamin Morrison. Number 48, Travion Henderson. 47, Mason Taylor. 46, Jared Wilson. 45, Torrey Horton. 44, Aronte Aircy. 43, Walter Nolan. 42, Tyler Booker. 41, Carson Schlesinger. And 40, Kevin Winston Jr., the safety out of Penn State.
Nice. And I've got 50, Jack Besh. I had to get him in there. At 49, I've got Tyleek Williams, the defensive tackle from Ohio State. At 48, I've got Jacob Parrish, the cornerback from Kansas. Have I got that right? Let me just make sure I have that right. From Kansas State, sorry. Yeah. Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama. Braden Swinson, the edge from LSU, is at 46. At 45, I've also got Ariante Ursary. At 44, I've got Alec Iomanor, the wide receiver from Stanford. At 43, I've got Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee, the interior defensive lineman. At 42, I've got Donovan Jackson. At 41, I've got Walter Nolan. So, Nu, give me three players from your top 50 to 41 who you'd kind of like to explain why you have them where you do. I mean, I'm quite interested personally in your Travion Henderson ranking because he's a lot higher on my board.
So I'm going to start off with number 50 with Landon Jackson, and I really wanted to put David Walker here. I really, really wanted to because Landon Jackson, he's not a big my guy at all in this draft, but I still think he's going to be a 10 to 15 year pro with 5 to 6 sacks production every year. So I couldn't not include him in my top 50, although it killed me to not include David Walker. 48, Trevor Henderson. I'm a big fan of this running back class, but I just where it fit in, I thought it felt right for him. I'm very low. I'm much lower on this running back class than you are. I've only got 3 running backs in my top 50. However, a lot of them would be in that 50 to 60 range. So I don't think I'm massively low on them. And the last player I want to point out is Kevin Winston Jr., who was in my defensive gems video, the safety out of Penn State. I'm such a big fan of this guy. He missed all last year with an injury, but if he played, he'd be a slam dunk first round pick. And I'm so happy after the video came out with the defensive gems, PFF actually ranked him as a first round player. So it's so nice to be vindicated by some of the pros. But he's a name that you haven't had a lot through the draft cycle that I could really expect to be going in the first round or top of the second.
Yeah, Kevin Winston Jr. is a really good shout from you there. He didn't quite make my top 50, but I completely agree with you. It's just the guy that didn't play in his final year at college, but was looking really, really good before that in last season. Now, in mine, I think Jacob Parrish is a cornerback that I just fell in love with. He's so scrappy, so physical in press coverage. I really like his play style. I kind of struggle to quit those smaller, scrappy press cornerbacks. He could be a nickel, could be a corner, but I think he's definitely a player that you might not see in a lot of top 50s, but has made it into mine. Also in that vein, Braden Swinson, the edge from LSU, I think is someone that's getting a bit more traction now as someone that I think has a high floor, but not a very high ceiling in the sense that he has a really good power rush profile, which I think is the easiest way to win as a pass rusher in the NFL by having that power profile. There are other edge rushers that I've had to put lower, not lower than Braden Swinson, but lower than I would have liked to have them because they don't have that power profile. But I think he's someone that if your team drafts him at the top of the second, very few edge rushers actually do anything really in the second round. You need those guys to be kind of first round players, but I think Braden Swinson could break that mold. And then I want to talk about Elikai Manor, the wide receiver from Stanford as well. He's just someone that ever since we did summer scouting, which we'll definitely be doing again, I've just loved Ayamana on what he brings as that kind of true X receiver in a kind of mold of receiver that is a little bit less trendy these days in the NFL, I would say, but nevertheless, I think he's a great player. And Omar Norman-Lott is the final one. Oh, there's so many good players, actually. That's what I'm saying, man. I'm looking at this list.
It's a deep draft. It's a really deep draft.
It's a really deep draft. Like, I think you're just going to get a lot of starters. You might not have a lot of star power, but you're going to get a lot of starters. But Omar Norman-Lott, I think he's the best interior pass rusher in this class. I had to get him at 43. Donovan Jackson, finally, the last one I want to shout out, is the guard tackle from Ohio State. He'll be a guard, I think, at the next level. Despite really having some proper tackle ability, he saved Ohio State's season by being a more than acceptable tackle. But I think he's someone that could creepily sneak into the back of the first with someone like the Kansas City Chiefs who desperately need offensive line help. And I think Donovan Jackson really is kind of being a bit underrated at this point now.
Yeah, I agree, actually, Dom. He didn't make my top 50 either, but there's a lot of second round linemen like Donovan Jackson, the tackle out of Purdue, Mbo, I think.
Mbo, I think it's just Mbo.
Yeah, there's so many of these second round tackles who I think will get regular minutes starting next season. So maybe it could lower the draft stock of the tackles higher up the board because you can get a very serviceable player in the second round at a high positional value.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like second round, like teams like the Giants, the Patriots, teams that are picking early in the second, you're going to get a starting caliber player in the second round, 100%, I think. And so I know the draft's all about the first round, but if you're a fan out there, make sure you watch or at least stay tuned into the second round because there's going to be players that are going to slip out of the first round, 100%. Maybe that's a Mekrik Buka, maybe that's Malachi Starks, maybe that's James Pierce Jr. Like there are going to be players that will slip, there always are. But in this class, like you say, which is really deep, there's going to be players that are going to go in, that should go in the first, that aren't going to because of team needs or different boards. So keep your eyes peeled. Now, new 40 through to 31.
So I made a mistake. I went to 40. I'll do 39 to 31. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that's fine too.
So number 39, I've got Dom's favourite player in the draft, Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas.
Nice.
Then I got Jack Sawyer, edge out of Ohio State. Nick Scorton, edge out of Texas A&M. Elikai Manor, who just talked about. Shamar Stewart, Jaden Higgins, Donovan Ezeraku, Trey Amos, and then I got my boy Jackson Dart in at 31.
That's revolting. Okay, there's a lot of players. We've got a lot of players we need to break down in that list, but I'll go over mine now. So at 40, I've got Andrew Makuba, the safety from Texas. I've spoken about him in the Defensive Gems episode. Love that guy. 39, I've got Trey Harris. I was umming and ahhing about Iamano and Harris, but I'm going to go in on Harris over Iamano. I think that he's being someone that's kind of being underrated at this point in this draft cycle. I think that the offense he played in Old Miz was a big limiter to his draft stock. 38, Jalen Walker. We're going to talk about him. 37, I got Matthew Golden. We're going to talk about him. 36, I got Carson Schlesinger. At 35, I've got Azarie Thomas. I love both of those defensive guys. At 34, I've got Shamar Stewart. You have Shamar Stewart pilled me. I'm pleased to say we'll definitely talk about Stewart. 33, I've got Jahdae Barron. Controversial.
Ooh, that's low.
32, Travion Henderson from Ohio State. I got that guy in the first round. I think he's so electric. I absolutely love him. And finally, at 31, I've got Josh Connolly, the offensive tackle from Oregon. So, remind me of your top 10. Let's choose 4 guys to talk about.
I'll talk through 3 or 4. I'll leave Matthew Golden up to you as the generational hater that you are on him. I think you could say it best than me, but I want to highlight Jack Sawyer in particular.
I want to talk about Sawyer.
Because he's someone that I've been higher on all throughout this draft season. I ranked him as my 5th ranked edge when we ranked edges back in probably about December time, but since then he slipped down. But I think he's a perfect edge number 2. I think he's very refined, very polished, good pass rush moves, and can really be a contributor day one. And I think at the top of the second, that'd be amazing value for a player of his caliber. Again, I think it goes high as the Lions. We talked about pairing him with Aiden Hutchinson. I think would be a perfect pairing, an absolute slam dunk of a pick.
I just think quickly on Sawyer. I used to have that as well. I used to have him as like a fringe first round player. Having just watched other edges and rewatching him, I don't think I think I wouldn't take him until the 3rd round, like maybe even day 3. Honestly, when it's all said and done, I just don't really love his skill set translating to the NFL. Frankly, like I think he and Cameron Williams, the offensive tackle from Texas, when they were, when Jack Sawyer was working Cameron Williams, I think that was 2 day 3 guys basically kind of going at it, or 2 non-first rounders going at it. And let it be known that New at one point gave the Texans Cameron Williams in a mock draft.
I did.
So, who's the next player?
You've already talked about Eleka Iamano. Again, his game against Travis Hunter. Please, if you just have 10 minutes in a day,
beautiful.
Watch those highlights. That could have spent him as a top 10 pick if there weren't other injury issues and on a fading Stanford offense. But he's a player that really stands out for me. And I also just want to talk about Jackson Dart, because this is going to be a big point of contention. I've always been higher on this quarterback class, which has been probably the thing we've talked about most about on the YouTube. But I really think he is a very good developmental quarterback. I think he will get drafted in the 1st round, if not top of the 2nd. And if you're a team with an aging quarterback, you've seen how bad the quarterback market is in free agency. There's so many stopgap QBs at the moment. I really think Jackson Dart, if you're a team with a bit house money to play with, if you had a good record or lots of draft picks, I'd really take a swing on Jackson Dart, because I do see the athletic potential. The issue is maybe his processing is something that might not be able to get to the NFL standard, but that's only something that good coaching will be able to help. So I'm higher on Jackson Dart than most, but I think 31 is a fair take from me.
I don't know, man. He's now no longer attending the NFL draft after previously been inviting and accepting. So I wonder if he's kind of doesn't want that Will Levis kind of situation with him in the green room for hours and then having to go home. So I wonder, I do think that will eventually be where he's taken. I think the Giants at 33 or 34 could definitely take a swing on him, and then we'll definitely hear your take on that. And then give me 1 or 2 more there from you.
Trey Amos, the corner out of Ole Miss. I think he's someone who's been really slept on this draft season.
He's not in my top 50.
I know, and it's surprising to me because I think he played at Alabama before transferring to Ole Miss.
He did.
He's had 4 years of starting SEC experience and at a high caliber as well. He's going up against NFL caliber wide receivers and holding his own week in, week out. I really think he's more or less a plug and play corner, especially with someone with as much experience as him. I think if you're in that range, that is someone you really want to focus on.
Nice. Okay, so from my list, I definitely want to talk about Jalen Walker and Matthew Golden. We have spoken about them in our overrated, underrated players, because I think both of them are being overrated. I just see Matthew Golden as a high-end 2, and as a result, I really wouldn't take a swing on him in the 1st round. I would love him at someone like the Cowboys as a wide receiver 2 behind CeeDee Lamb, but I obviously wouldn't take him at 12 where they're picking. And Jalen Walker, I think he's going to go at 8 to the Panthers when it's all said and done. I think that's what I think will happen. And I just don't see that. He's a sawn-off, inexperienced pass rusher who I think is relatively ineffective in terms of his pass rush moves and pass rush plan. And I just don't get it. Now, Carson Swessinger and Nazario Thomas, I've already said I love. Now, Shamar Stewart new. Let's have a conversation about Shamar Stewart. I previously I think with Shamar Stewart, I've fallen victim to the combine measurements and the metrics from that. You've been a very early and vocal doubter of Shamar Stewart. Why don't you give us one final victory lap, as it were, having now convinced me to have him as not a first-round player on my board?
Yeah, I never really understood the hype, Dom. And the main reason was that his production does not match his traits. There's nothing wrong with a player having traits and drafting on traits, just like I said with Jackson Dart. But when you have that, when you're that fast, that explosive, to have that low level of production, I think there's a big disconnect there. He has no pass rush plan. And the big thing for me, which I keep on hammering home about, which I actually don't see talked enough about, he's a terrible tackler. You know,
yeah, he falls
off tackles. He can't finish the play. And I understand, there's a big debate on, pressure rates versus sack numbers and how one can be misleading. And he doesn't really, I think his pressure rate's, 13%, Dom. You'll be able to.
Yeah, it's 12.7.
12.7.
And on true pass sets, that's on, obvious passing downs, no chip help, no RPO, nothing. It's just purely offensive line versus defensive line, get to the quarterback. Usually you see some players jump by as much as 10% in their win rate. So James Pierce Jr. goes from 24 to 30. Shamar Stewart only goes from 12.7% to 17%. It is really ugly. It is the Moneyball thing. It is how, if he's a good pass rusher, how come he doesn't rush the passer good? So I'm completely with you there, New. Shamar Stewart on traits alone is kind of up at 34 as a fringe, as a day 2 pick for me, fringe first round if it comes down to it. But I'm not a Shamar Stewart truther anymore, New.
No, but what I would say is, I remember when Rashawn Gary got drafted to the Packers, similar style of story, 5-star recruit who just couldn't put it together in college, never had those good sack numbers, but turned out to be a Pro Bowl caliber defensive end. So again, I think if you give the time coaching and the space to do it, I think he can get there. But on film right now, he is nowhere near, and that's why he can't be a first-round pick in my eyes.
Nice. Now let's go 30 to 21. Who have you got?
So I got Shavon Ravel, the cornerback out of East Carolina. Yeah. Gray Zabel, the guard out of North Dakota. Jalen Walker, who you already mentioned, Dom. Nick Emanwari, the safety out of South Carolina. Omarion Hampton. Derek Harmon. Michael Williams. Shador Sanders at 23, Dom, quarterback out of Colorado.
Disgusting.
Josh Connolly and Jihad Campbell, my top-rated linebacker out of Alabama.
Nice. Okay, I've got Omarion Hampton at 30, the running back from UNC. At 29, I've got Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle. At 28, I've got Shavon Ravel as well. I think it's actually Savon Revel, I think it's going to be pronounced.
I did not know that.
I know. Secret H and a silent H in there, apparently. 27, I've got Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver from Ohio State. 26, I got Nick Scarton, the edge from A&M. I said I was going to have him higher than Shamar Stewart, and I've stuck by my guns. I'll talk about him definitely. 25, I've got Luther Burden, the wide receiver from Missouri. At 24, I've got Donovan Ezaraku, the edge from Boston College. At 23, I've got Jalen Knoll, the wide receiver from Iowa State. At 22, I've got Gray Zabel, the offensive lineman from NDSU. At 21, I've got Michael Williams. And do I do 20? No, I don't.
No.
So, you raised your eyebrows at a few of mine, notably Egbuka, Burden, and Knoll, my wide receiver rankings. Now, I have got a video on my wide receiver rankings. If you want to check out that in more detail, go and check it out. But the TLDR of that is basically, if I'm looking for a slot receiver, I'm going to take the explosiveness that Jalen Knoll offers my offense over the floor that Emeka Egbuka offers my offense. And I think even with someone like Golden, who I'm not high on, I think has a better chance of being a 1 than Egbuka does. And I think you're drafting in the first round for ceiling mostly, not for floor. You're obviously keeping that in mind. I think if you get to the back end of the first round, Egbuka is great value there because you do get, you are getting a good player. Don't get me wrong. I am very confident that Egbuka is going to be a good player. I'm just not confident he's going to be a great one. And I do think that the same exists with Burden. And I think for me, I feel a lot more confident about the explosiveness that Knoll gives my offense, the deep threat that Knoll gives my offense, the dynamism that Knoll gives my offense, that I really don't think, well, definitely Egbuka, maybe Burden does to a degree, but definitely Egbuka, which is why he's lower than both of those guys. I just don't really know what he gives. I think he's a zone coverage killer, absolutely. I don't think he's that great against man coverage. I think he's, not that sudden, not that dynamic, and I kind of struggle to get on board with Egbuka any higher than the back end of the first, which I don't think is harsh for what it's worth. I just think I'm not, a bit like how I saw it in the beginning. Again, I've come around in the summer scouting, I said that I kind of see Egbuka as like a Chris Godwin kind of player, like a good 2 and kind of never really more than that. And that's it with Egbuka. And I do love the Iowa State guys, Jalen Knoll.
Yeah, I think this is the biggest disconnect we're going to have in our top 50s is the wide receivers. With the exception of our number one receiver, who I'm sure we'll talk about later. I think my list is almost completely different to yours. We've basically got no overlap whatsoever. And I think what's interesting is I haven't changed my opinions that much since about January on the receivers. You know, obviously, players like Jalen Higgins, Jalen Knoll, who have come up, I've become a lot higher on. But I'm sticking by my guys. I'm like Brendan McCullum. You know, pick your players and back them to the end. I think that's really interesting, though. Why do you like the Iowa State guys so much? Like, why? Because they weren't an amazing college team. So
No,
what jumps out at you for them?
They weren't an amazing college team. And what it is about Knoll is, again, I think he's so explosive off the line of scrimmage. He's got a track background, and you can see that. I think he's a really good deep threat. He has a cut-up now of all of his 15-yard or more receptions from this year, and it's over 3 minutes long. Like, he is a fantastic deep ball receiver from the slot position. He's only got 4 drops this year. He understands how to get open deep down the field. So where someone like Egbuka or Burden kind of excel in the short area of the field, and Egbuka specifically against zone, I think Knoll just knows how to get open downfield. He's not trying to just run past guys. He's putting moves on them, and he just is quick and decisive with his footwork. I think, you know, he ran a 4.39. That speed didn't show up on tape. I'm going to be fair. The golden speed didn't show up on tape either. The Knoll didn't show up on tape as well. But fundamentally, if I'm looking for a slot receiver, like I said, I'm going to draft Knoll over Egbuka. And I'm going to talk a bit more about Jaden Higgins when eventually he comes up, which is a bit of a spoiler for later. But then, speaking of later, give me your 22.
Wait, can I quickly just talk about Shedeur Sanders real quick?
Oh, sorry, yeah, you've got to talk about Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, so I just want to quickly highlight 2 players. First, I want to talk about Nick Emenwari, who I don't believe you have in your top 50.
I don't. I've got Makuba, I've got Starks, and I'll have Winston ahead of him, I think, when it's all said and done.
So I must admit that I overranked him after the combine. He was my 14th overall player last time we did this, which was too high. But I still think he has special size and speed, and I love the aggression that he plays with. Yeah. I think if he were him or Malachi Starks, we'll talk about later, were to go to the Vikings, I think they could be Defensive Player of the Year candidates from day one. But now Shedeur Sanders, who we've been back and forth about this all the time, but I think this is so fair for a player of his caliber. I think this is where he should be drafted, and I think this is where his talent lies perfectly. Last time we did this, I ranked him in the top 10, and the comments flamed me pretty badly. I got personal messages from people I haven't talked to in years saying, why are you putting him in the top 10? But like I said before, I think he'd be an above average starter in the most important position of football. Simple as that. I think that deserves a top 25 pick, in my opinion.
See, with Sanders, the reason why I put him lower is because I think, he'll be an adequate quarterback. I don't really think that's that valuable in the modern NFL, frankly. Like, I think we see Sanders the same way. I just think we see his value differently. And I think with Sanders, man, like, that's kind of why I kind of cheated and put Milroe next to him, because I think if you're looking for floor, you want Sanders. If you're looking for ceiling, you want Milroe. And I do really like what Milroe could offer, but man, I'm not taking Shedeur Sanders in the first round. I'm just not doing it. And so I get where you're coming from. I think your ranking now is fairer than in the top 10, because I think before you were just going off where you thought it was going to be drafted. But man, I mean, I think you see the quarterback class how I see the wide receiver class, basically. We kind of like swapped on those regards. Speaking of, then, and wait, did you have one more player? I actually wanted to talk about Nick Scouser just very quickly.
Yeah, of course.
I went back and watched his Purdue tape. I went back and crunched his Purdue numbers as well. His pass rush win rate at Purdue was so much better. His pass rush tape was so much better at Purdue. He was playing 20 pounds lighter. I think at this point, Nick Scouton's being underrated, and I would take him ahead of his Texas A&M teammate 100% at this point. Is there anyone else you want to shout out before we go to our 20 to 11?
Let's go. I'll read out my 20 to 11.
Go, hit me.
Okay, so number 20, I got Colson Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan.
Nice.
19, I got Jade Barron, the cornerback out of Texas. 18, James Pierce Jr., the edge out of Tennessee. 17, Igmeka Egbuka, who you just talked about. 16, Kelvin Banks, the tackle out of Texas. 15th, another your guy, Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan.
Nice.
14th, Luther Burden, wide receiver out of Missouri.
Mate, that is
13, Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia. 12,
Nice.
Josh Simmons, the tackle out of Ohio State. And 11, Mike Green, the edge out of Marshall.
Right, nice. We've got a lot of overlap with these players here now, apart from one. My 20th ranked player is Kyle Williams, the wide receiver from Washington State. I've got Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas at 19, Colston Loveland at 18, Jaden Higgins, the wide receiver from Iowa State at 17, Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle from Ohio State at 16, Mike Green, the edge from Marshall at 15, 14, I've got Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle from Michigan. At 13, I've got Jihad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama. At 12, I've got James Pierce Jr., and at 11, I've got Cam Ward. So I'll talk about Kyle Williams and Jaden Higgins quickly, because then we've got a lot of overlap with these other players. So Kyle Williams, I think, is the most explosive wide receiver in this class. He's so good off the line of scrimmage. He's so quick. He's untouchable. He's good in the air with contested catches. He's good with the ball in his hands. I just think that because he doesn't have any elite athletic trait, he's not tall. He's not overly fast. He's not, strong. Or overly strong, rather. I think that means he's getting slept on. And I think Kyle Williams, who is the guy that does those crazy wide receiver rankings? They're like the bald guy.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah, it's literally just clickbait. It's rage bait.
Yeah, I think he had Kyle Williams as like his wide receiver 3. And at the time I was like, this
Chris
guy,
Sims.
man. Chris Sims, that's it. I'm basically like Chris Sims at this point, which I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but I just love what Kyle Williams brings. And I think that Jaden Higgins is that wide receiver 1 potential that I don't think Golden has, I don't think Ibuka has, I don't think that Jalen Knoll has, or that Kyle Williams has. I think that Jaden Higgins has that one potential with Travis Hunter, with Tether McMillan, which is why he's at 17 for me. So then, where we overlap, Colston Loveland. Talk to me about him.
Again, he similar to a lot of the Michigan guys who we'll talk about in our top 10 through 1, he just sort of suffers from success. He does everything so well. He's a very polished blocker, very polished route runner, great hands. He is a hardball guy. Him to the Chargers is one of the best mocks you can do. I really do like him. I think Dan Jeremiah had him as high as 6 at one point.
He's high. He's high.
Again, he's just the if you were to draw up a tight end in a lab, if you were to close your eyes and think of a tight end, he would look like Colston Loveland. And that's why I think he's in this perfect range. I think he's a day 1 contributor. I think he's gonna step in and get like 800 to 1,000 yards basically every season of his career. But I just don't see that really top end, that all Pro Bowl level tight end. So that's why for me, he's a lower mid first round pick, but I still think he's got good value.
Yeah, I really like Loveland as well. And I know people are higher on him than this. And I think 18 is fair for what it's worth. Like, I know people have him in the top 10. I know he's like, 6 and 7 with Warren and for some people and stuff like that. And I think he'll definitely go earlier than 18 when it's all said and done in the draft. And I really wouldn't hate it either. I just look at the players ahead of him and I'm like, well, I kind of feel better about those guys' projection personally. And I know Loveland is, people go back and watch his tape and now think he might be a better blocker than before. And that might be the case. But it's a case of I like Loveland. I don't love Loveland, if that makes sense.
Yes. I just want to quickly talk about Mike Green because I think he's a top 10, top 15 player. However, more than James Pierce Jr., there's been some serious criminal
character concerns.
Character concerns. If those are true, obviously, I think there's a chance he might fall completely out of round 1. So I think that's one just to highlight a bit. Again, Luther Burden, I think he just suffers from prospect fatigue. I think he's a really good player, and I think he goes as high as 8 to the Panthers. I wouldn't hate that, or 12 to the Cowboys.
8 to the Panthers is.
I really think he's a great wide receiver number 2, and he's a really modern style of receiver. He really is a Malik Neighbors light, and I really think you see that transfer to the NFL consistently. So that's why I have him at 14. Although I do appreciate your wide receiver rankings. I don't hate them. I don't think it's. I think sometimes some of your takes can be a bit chronically online, but I think your wide receiver ones are a bit more measured.
Chronically online. All right, it's the first time I've heard that. Let's talk about James Pierce Jr. here. Where did you have him ranked?
I had him ranked at 18, I believe.
So he's your edge. What 4 behind Mike Green, behind Abdul Carter?
Yes, he's my edge. Mike Green, Abdul Carter is my edge 3.
Edge 3, okay. So he's my edge 2. I really like James Pierce Jr. He's 12. He's a fringe top 10 player for me. I think he's really good. I think the way he wins is going to translate to the league. I know he's lighter, but he plays heavier. I think that if he falls, it's not impossible at the moment. It seems that he falls out of the first round into the second. I think a team is going to get a steal in the second round if this guy falls out of the first. I think he's so damn good. I love James Pierce Jr. I'm going to plant my flag here and now, Nu, that he is it is Abdul Carter and then James Pierce Jr. Then for me, it's quite a big floor after that. Now there is a big gap between Abdul Carter and James Pierce Jr. Don't worry, but it's kind of equal from Abdul Carter to James Pierce Jr. as it is from James Pierce Jr. to Mike Green, just because of the character concerns and things like that. And I got Cam Ward at 11, just outside the top 10. He's a QB1, yes, and worth taking with the first overall pick because he's a quarterback, but he's not as good as Drake May, as Caleb Williams, as Jaden Daniels. He's kind of being that I think he's better than Bo, or at least as a prospect for me now, he'd be ranked higher than Bo Nix, he'd be ranked higher than McCarthy, and he'd be ranked higher than Michael Penix.
I think it's harsh to compare people in different draft classes. I understand what you're saying, and I know that next year's class is, fabled with, Drew Allo and Arch Manning. But
Cade
Klubnik, who I actually thought Drew Allo, Cade Klubnik could have been a first-round pick this year. But
yeah, same. Yeah. It's a good QB class next year.
Again, but I think, I feel like there's always, the grass is always green. There's always next year. Yeah. And, as you know, jobs in the NFL don't last very long. So I think it's very easy to say, well, why would you take a quarterback this year when the quarterback class next year is so good?
Yeah.
I think it's I understand the criticism, but I do think it's slightly harsh.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're right. It is always greener. Like it's not as simple as, well, I'll just wait. Like some people don't have the job security. Like even the Titans who do, I don't think it's hard as a football team for you to have the first overall pick and go, you know what, we're going to roll in the season with Will Levis when he has basically had picks that I think should get him done for match fixing. And even as a new GM, it's not a great way to start your career by being like, oh, well, I'm just going to wait because, look, I mean, it could be the case that I don't think Arch Manning's going to declare. You might have the case where Cade Klubnik takes a step back. Maybe Drew Aller isn't quite the same quarterback without Tyler Warren in that offense. It is the unknown, and we have the known factor of the players in this draft. So I do agree with you, Nuno, and I completely share that thought. Is there anyone else you want to highlight before we move on to our top 10s?
I think we should get to our top 10, Doms, because I think we're going to have a lot of debate and a lot of differences. So I think we should spend some time talking about the top 10.
All right, hit me with yours.
So at 10, I got Will Campbell, the tackle/guard from LSU. 9, I got Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. 8, I got Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. 7, I've got Ashton Genty, the running back out of Boise State. 6, I got Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan.
Oh, wow.
5, I've got Travis Hunter.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The cornerback wide receiver out of Colorado. 4, I got Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami. 3, I've got Aman Membu, the tackle out of Missouri. 2, I've got Teto McMillan. And 1, Abdul Carter, the linebacker out of Penn State.
So how much are you factoring in positional value here, having Cam Ward at 4 behind, say, Travis Hunter?
I think it's always doing these top 50 boards. It's hard. And when I did my first one, I think I got it a bit wrong. I'll take a step back, and I think I factored in positional value a bit too much, but it still has to be a factor. Right? We're not putting kickers and punters in here. And in reality, Ashton Genty is probably number 1, but I'm happy with him at 7, if that makes any sense. So, yes, I think it's fair. Where you saying Cam Ward's the 11th best player in this class, I would still have him slightly higher, purely on just talent. But because he is a quarterback, I think I have to put him in the top 5, which I think is a bit more of a rounded take than my previous one.
Yeah, it's a bit better. I mean, I don't think that Cam Ward is a top 5 player in this class, which I know isn't how you're looking at it because there is positional value. I completely agree with you. I think 5 is a little rich, but then again, it's a weaker overall class. So it is in that context, absolutely. He probably wouldn't be 5 in last year's class, right? I mean, being in agreement in that. Yeah. My 10 through 1, before we talk about specific other players, at 10 I got Malachi Starks, safety from Georgia. 9 I've got Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan. 8 I've got Amar Membu, the tackle from Missouri. 7 I've got Will Campbell, the tackle from LSU. 6, I got Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. 5, Mason Graham, the defensive tackle from Michigan. 4, Ashton Genty, the running back from Boise State. 3, Teto McMillan, our GOAT, wide receiver 1, and from Arizona. And from 2, I got Travis Hunter. 1, I've got Abdul Carter. So let's talk about Will Johnson because he's your 6th.
10th player, 10th overall player.
Who is your 6th then? Someone you said
6th, Will Johnson.
Will Johnson?
Cornerback.
Yeah. So he's your 6th. Who did I say?
You said Will Campbell.
Oh, I meant Will Johnson. Sorry.
Yeah, you're not going to gaslight me. How you done?
Oh my god!
videos.
Yeah, when I gaslit you on that last episode, that was so bad, man. Like in the editing room afterwards, I was like, "Shoot, Jesus!" I was really gaslighting him there. It was about quarterbacks. Anyway,
yeah.
So You've got Will Johnson, and the thing is, the difference from 9 and 6, I think, is actually quite significant because when you're in the top 10, it is so much kind of closer in terms of talent. It's not like 40 to 50 where there's a really big gap. So, talk to me about why you're a bit higher on Johnson than me.
I think he could be a superstar corner in the NFL. Simple as that. I think he could be a top 5 corner in the NFL. I think his man-to-man abilities are by far the best in his class. I know man-to-man's slightly dying out in the NFL these days with most teams running majority zone, but I think Will Johnson can play zone as well. But I think he could be, a Sauce Gardner style, like Darrell Reeves style, follow a receiver all game. Not going to have similar, you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And I think that is so valuable. I think corner for years has been a really undervalued position. It's sort of been, an afterthought, even though it's probably the most difficult position to play in the NFL, which most pro players say. And I really think that he had a few issues this year. Didn't seem like he really cared that much on a struggling Michigan team. But on that national championship team last year, he was an absolute defensive superstar. And that's why I think he's a top 6 overall player.
Yeah, it's just hard, I think, for Johnson because he did have that step back in with obviously with the injury, but also like on tape, there are those kind of effort concerns that people have, and he didn't, test that well. I don't think it's all that important, but I think that has for me kind of given me pause for thought on Johnson. But I think like at 9 with the Saints, that would be a perfect place for him to go, and I think that he'll be a player that might fall a bit further than we suspect potentially if some quarterbacks go, if depending on how the board falls. That would be a really great value in like the mid-teens, even as early as that. So I really like Will Johnson as well. And then where do you have Tyler Warren?
Tyler Warren, I got number 8. And I think me and you were on the Tyler Warren hype train early doors.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I love this guy.
We both love this guy. And I think it's, tight ends that have been drafted, highly in the last couple of years. They've been a bit more hit or miss than I expected. Carl Pitts, OJ Howard, just to name a few that didn't quite work out. Yeah. But I really do believe in Tyler Warren. And I think Tyler Warren to the Colts, I would love that pick so much.
No, Bears.
But Bears would work. I love his positional versatility. I love his blocking in the run game. I love his speed, his hands, his route running. I really think he is the full package, Dom.
Yeah, I mean, I love Tyler Warren. You say he's the full package. I mean, he can literally be the entire offensive package if you wanted him to. Right?
He was at Penn State.
Yeah, he can play any position. That's why I love him at the Bears. And I think that fit with Ben Johnson and his positionless style of football, with Penei Sewell catching hook and ladders and Dan Skipper lined out as a wide receiver at points. I think he just works so well. And I do think, though, that what's interesting with Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland is I really like them both. But I struggle to find landing spots for them both in the first half of the first round if the Colts don't go with a tight end. Like the Jets need a tight end, but I don't know if they're going to draft one at 7 when they have so many other holes. The Colts already have A.D. Mitchell, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman. Are they going to add another weapon when they need defensive players? So I think that for the tight ends for Warren and Loveland, I've seen Peter Schrager say that Loveland's going to go super early. One of them, I think, could fall further than we suspect come draft day, just because are there really going to be 2 tight ends taken in the top 15 picks of a draft? I don't know if that would have ever happened before.
Maybe definitely not back in the day with how tight ends were used in modern offenses.
That's something definitely to keep an eye on. I would go Warren over Loveland, but I can see it's like, Team Cap or Team Iron Man. Like I can see both of the points, and then we'll finish it off then with our top 4 with Ashton. Let's talk about Ashton Genty. You have him where? 5.
Yeah, I've got him at 7. Sorry, Dom. I know it's so hard to keep track. Obviously, Dom's going to do the editing, put it up on the screen. I love Ashton Genty. I think Travis Hunter, who I'm a bit of a hater on, has his Heisman. He really deserved that Heisman. And I just think he's a complete running back. I think his contact balance is second to only Saquon Barkley in the NFL. When he comes in, straight away.
Yeah.
I love him to the Bears. That'd be my personal place for him. He can step in and be a top 5 running back in the NFL straight away. He's going to be a first round in fantasy drafts, and I think he's a real offense changer. I think similar to running backs were massively overdrafted and underdrafted, and I think now it's reached a happy medium where people understand how important the running back position is and what running back can do for you. But you're not going to see running back going first overall, but you're not going to see no running backs taking the first round, which I think is good for running backs and the position as a whole.
Yeah, nice. I got Genty at 4. A bit of positional value mixed in with that, but I mean, he is just a fantastic player. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The way I sum it up, I think Carter's got the highest ceiling. If he becomes a Micah Parsons-esque pass rusher, well worth first round pick. I think Travis Hunter's the most talented, being able to play cornerback and wide receiver to a really high level. And I think that Ashton Genty's the best, frankly, at one single position right now, which is running back. And I think with any of those three players, you can't really go wrong. McMillan, you got him at
2.
2. Wow. I mean, I got him at 3, but 2. I think having McMillan ahead of Hunter is.
Let me just say my Travis Hunter take again. I'll give you a brief summation.
You see the comments on the last video? You got backed, man. You got backed.
I know, and I told you I would be. I think it's a chronically online take, Dom. Basically, I was thinking about this after we did the podcast, after we did the video. And I was thinking about Isaiah Simmons, who's one of my favorite players that I've ever scouted, because I thought he was going to change the defensive position. I thought he could play slot corner and blitz off the edge. I thought he was going to revolutionize the way his defenses were played. He couldn't even do that. He couldn't even play 2 positions on a defense. The idea that Travis Hunter can play meaningful snaps on both offense and defense, learning 2 playbooks, half the snap count at both, half the practices at both, I think is balmy, to be honest with you. But I do think he's my cornerback number 1, and I do think that he can play some wide receiver, maybe 5 to 10 snaps a game, and that's why he's my 5th overall pick. For 5th overall player, rather, sorry.
I do understand where you're coming from with this Travis Hunter argument, but I do think that with the Browns and where he's going now, presumably either to the Browns or to the Giants, I think he would be a primary wide receiver. And I think what he would do is he would come on the field for like third downs where NFL defenses have specific third down packages which he can learn and can rep. And then you have him a full-time wide receiver and full-time cornerback. But that's why I think Hunter's so valuable, because it's not necessarily that he plays 2 positions at once and plays them full-time. It's that you can draft him for either and put him where he needs to be. So for the Browns, for example, if Martin Emerson Jr. continues to have a bad year like he did last year, then he might want to go and play corner full time. If Cedric Tillman and Jerry Jeudy don't pick up where they left off, you want him at wide receiver. So it's not that he plays them both at the same time, it's that he can play both at a really high level, which is kind of the subtle nuance that I think we're kind of coming at this angle from, but I do get where you're coming from. And so then Abdul Carter is our number 1 ranked player for us both.
Yes.
I just think that what you are getting is a Micah Parsons-esque potential kind of player. His get-off per next-gen stats at one point versus Ohio State was faster than any Micah Parsons get-off in the NFL, was faster than any Saquon Barkley breakaway run in the NFL, and that's not top speed, that's just initial acceleration. And that acceleration alone is going to play, let alone his tenacity, his kind of physical and athletic profile. Like, this guy is just the real deal. And I think at the beginning we scoffed at the Micah Parsons comparisons, him wearing 11, playing at Penn State, converting from off-ball linebacker to edge. But I truly think it is apt, and I think it is fair to compare him to Micah Parsons. And so for me, he's my first ranked player.
Yeah, Dom, that 11 at Penn State, if you wear that is like a gold medal. That is a badge of honor.
The aura.
If you just want any more proof that Abdul Carter is the number 1 overall player, watch his worst ranked game, worst rated game by PFF, which was against West Virginia. He still completely dominates. Every single play he's beating the tackle, even if it doesn't convert to pressures, he's always a presence on every single snap. And I think that's what you want to see for number 1 overall pick, is dominance. You know, we talked a lot about traits and a lot about production, and how do you weigh that up? For the first overall pick, you need both. And Abdul Carter definitely has both. And that's why, for me, if he were to fall to the Giants at 3, I'd be over the moon. We could finally move on from Kayvon Thibodeau. But I think I still think that, him versus Cam Ward, I think the debate's more or less over. But I don't think it's an unfair debate to be had just because of the quality of player that Abdul Carter is.
Yeah, I totally agree. But that has been our final top 50 big board. That wraps up our pre-2025 NFL draft content. Make sure you let us know about your thoughts in the comments below. I got flamed last time for being too in line with consensus. New got flamed for having Shadur Sanders ranked ahead of basically every player in the draft class. We're open to comments. We want to know what you think. Let us know in the comments. Are there players that you like that aren't in our top 50? Are there players that you don't like that are in our top 50? And also, if you haven't already, again, make sure you subscribe for more draft content. But I've been your host, Dom Corbs. That's my co-host, Nick Corbs. We've been Corbs NFL. We'll see you on the next video.
See ya.